Okay, in a previous video, we talked about installing SMB, and we talked about installing Samba to do an SMB file share, which works well in a mixed network environment. Now, if you only have Linux devices, then you can use NFS, which has some serious advantages. Some people think the setup is a little more complicated. I don't. I actually think it's easier. And it integrates better with the native Linux file system permissions. So that's a couple of real big benefits. Technically, you can connect to an NFS file share from a Windows system, or it, the terminology is an NFS export, but that does sometimes, there's a couple of extra steps you need to use. So in a Linux only environment, it makes sense to use NFS sometimes. Although Samba will work just as well. In a mixed network environment, it probably makes a little more sense to use Samba and use SMB shares. Okay, so let's start by installing our NFS kernel. Now, I've already done this, but I'm going to walk you through the command anyway. So it's sudo, let me get to the right screen here, sudo apt install nfs-kernel-server. And that will install your NFS kernel server for you. Now, I've already done that primarily, so it would be done faster. So now that I've got that installed, then I can start looking at my configuration. And remember I said in Samba we refer to shares, in NFS we refer to exports. So this is going to be in the etc folder, and in the etc folder we're going to have a file called exports. So I'm going to nano exports. And I don't have write permissions because this is standard user. So you'll see here, this gives us some examples of what an NFS exports file would look like. Now you can also run the command man for manual. So man exports, and it will give you a bunch more information that can be very, very useful. So we're just going to do a real quick, simple example here. So before we do this, I'm going to go to my shares folder, and inside my shares folder, I'm just going to switch user here. I'm going to create a file named NFS, and that's going to be my NFS exports. So what I'm going to have here is, let me cd to NFS and pwd. So you see we have /shares/NFS. Now, /shares is going to be my root export. /NFS is going to be another export that's actually going to keep hold the user files. So just keep that in mind while we go back to etc. Now, I want to create a backup of my exports file. So it's going to be move mv exports to exports.org for original. And then I can nano exports and create a new one. Now, here's what we're going to have. So my root, I said, was going to be shares. And here are my options. Asterisk, open parentheses, RW, comma, FSID equals 0, comma, no, subtree, check. Okay, we're going to talk about that here in just a second. Let's create our other one, which is shares/NFS. And for that one, now, the /shares, that was our export root, which is just going to simplify things a little bit later on. So we're going to put that on hold. The asterisk means anybody can connect to this from any network. And then in parentheses are the options. RW is read write, FSID equals 0. That's what identifies it as a root export or export root. And then no subtree check says we don't want to do a subtree check on this when we share it or we export it. So shares NFS. This is going to be where we actually start holding user files. And for this one, I want to go ahead and put my network ID. Now, my network ID for the network that I'm on is 134. 169.161.88 / is going to say, the subnet mask is coming next. And this one is a /22. So the subnet mask is 255.255.252.0. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put the options for that particular export. So I want this to be RW for rewritable. And then again, I want no subtree check. And then close parentheses. All right, so I am going to save that file and exit. Now, just as a reminder, if you do man exports, you can look up the man pages, which is going to give you all of the information about all of your different options. So this is a great resource. In fact, most things, most commands, most systems are going to have a manual that you can type man in the command and it'll tell you about it. Q will get you out of there. Okay, so at this point, I need to restart my NFS server so it reloads those exports. I keep wanting to say shares. So it's systemctl restart nfs kernel server. And then I want to check the status of it. Systemctl status nfs kernel server. Okay, and we are up and running. So at this point, we have our NFS kernel server up and running, and we have exported some files to be connected to from remote computers. And so in our next video, that's what we're going to do.